everyone, and welcome to the DRW interviews. And today we have Nikki Julien, and I'm excited that she came to join us today because her and I met, of course, through Summer Institute. We met back in 2018. I made sure to do my homework to at least figure out the dates because the last time I was doing an interview, I couldn't, between myself and the other person, it's like, well, what year was that? But anyways, so we met through Summer Institute, and believe it or not, we're not just colleagues, but we're actually friends. And she's actually been to my home and met my husband and my daughter, and she actually got to meet Outbackers, which was really cool. And so I guess some of the other things that I want to mention is she's a part of AWF, and I want to make sure that I don't want to butcher the acronym or what the acronym stands for. So I'm going to let Nikki get into that. But I just want to say thank you for joining today and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks, Diona. It's so nice to be on your show. I love it. So I work for Arizona Wildlife Federation, and that's what AWF stands for. And I'll be using that. Acronym many, many times. So just pipe in with what it means every once in a while, so that all of you can remember. Arizona Wildlife Federation. So we are the state affiliate for the National Wildlife Federation. And so I'll be telling you a little bit about some of the programs that National Wildlife Federation does that as the outreach director for the Arizona Wildlife Federation, I'll be promoting here in the state. So very excited about that.
Awesome. So how did you get into the work of environmental ed?
Well, I've been doing this for definitely way over 20 years. So my interesting story about it is that I went out to, I've been taking hikes, and I think I was 18 or 19, and I joined the Student Conservation Association for a summer up in the Burn area of Yellowstone and right outside of Yellowstone. And I was with this group of people. I thought I was pretty like nature girl before I left and outdoorsy. And then I joined this group of people, young people, they're all my age, college age kids. And they all knew so much more about nature than I did. Either they had all kinds of different skills like rock climbing and biking, or they knew how to like bird and they could identify the trees. Or they knew the ecosystems. And when I got home from that summer, I was like, okay, I gotta take it up a notch. And I started identifying plants. And I came from a background of photography, really strong in photography. So I photographed every plant that I kind of met, put it in a scrapbook, and now I have about 5,000 species. I still photograph plants. And I take little samples and I make it into an herbarium, and I'm really, really proud of it. And but it's nothing compared to university herbariums. But maybe someday when I die, I'll donate my collection. But that's the secret you didn't know about me. So there you go. So that kind of started it all.
I didn't know.
And then I started reading a lot of. Thank you. Yeah, I started reading a lot of. Nature writing as well, and really, really got into that. In fact, so much so that my bachelor's degree became about finding a sense of place and how each person has their own way of wanting to connect with nature, whether it's outdoor recreation or whether it's birding or pressing plants or doing art or writing, whatever it is that reconnects you with nature, or hunting or fishing. Any of those things, rock climbing, whatever it is. And I did that at the Evergreen State College. And while I was reading all this material, it occurred to me that I didn't have a name for what it was when I was connecting people to nature.
Okay.
And then finally it was like, well, this is environmental education. And I had a great mentor at the Evergreen State College. And I was like, oh, well, I can't be a teacher. She's like, oh, you're a great teacher. Mm-hmm. And she started inviting me to teach at her nature writing classes. And we did a lot of sense of place work. And it was so wonderful. I love working with adults that figure out how they love nature. And for some people, it's been a love of nature for like their whole life. And other people didn't really connect with nature, but then, kind of have this aha moment of, oh, I feel better out here. I like this, or I can do this. It's very empowering. And I absolutely love that. So even though I work with kids a lot, kids naturally have that sense of wonder. So they're totally excited about being outside. And you give them something interesting inside or outside, it really makes no difference. They're just, the child comes out. And when I can see the child coming out in adults, I get really happy about that. It really fills my soul. So that's, that was when I was about between 20 and 23.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where the over 20 years part comes in, but we won't give an exact number.
What I love about what you shared is that it started almost with photography, like starting in that space, and then it just grew. Because that's part of how I found a way to connect with nature. As you know, I'm very cautious about nature, about touching nature, but I love to look at it. I love to listen and look. And so just validating to people, it's okay. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. I think that's important too. So, wow,
Absolutely.
I'm learning way too much about you. You've been holding back. So, and today you have been working with Arizona Wildlife Federation. And so how does that connect with your passion of working in nature? How does that connect to this work that you're doing now?
Sure. Well, I was an at-home mom for a long time. During my 20s and 30s, I loved taking my kids out. I think I still have more pictures of plants than my kids playing in nature, but they were in nature outside all the time. And we had a lot of fun with that. And during that time, that was when I was also teaching nature writing. I was doing a lot of nature writing, learning a lot about environmental education, volunteering with different places and groups. And by the time we moved to Phoenix, that was 2010, the kids were in high school and they were kind of done with me telling them, we're going to go on a hike. In fact, when we walked in the desert, because we were in Washington State before. So when we hiked around in the desert, I was from Arizona. I grew up in Sedona, Arizona. So being back in Arizona was such a great feeling for me. But my kids, I kind of, especially my daughter, I really upended their roots and took them out of Washington State. And so they weren't very happy with me for the first few years we were here. And then whenever I took them out into the desert to hike, they were like,
I'm sure
why does this compare? Yeah. They were like, this is no fun. So I did a lot of that. I started doing a lot more of that on my own. And I thought, well, I really need to share this with other people. If I can't share it with my kids, I got to share it with somewhere else. So I became a volunteer at the Desert Botanical Garden. That led me to taking the master, the landscaper course, I guess it's master landscaper course, certified landscaper, desert landscaper course, which was amazing. And then the next year I got hired by them to do environmental ed. So that was the first time that was 2011. That was the first time I did environmental education for money. And it was a school field trip every day, different ages, anywhere from kindergarten on up to high schoolers. And I learned, a lot about the group dynamics, not just about how to teach other people in nature, but we had a fairly, it was a very excellent curriculum, but there wasn't any time in it. You had to, it was, you had to do your stuff. And all of us different tour guides, we all had a different spin on it. We had a great time with it. I was also going through the Master Gardener course because I had gotten a gardening bug a few years before from a friend of mine in Washington State. And I went, well, this goes right along with my plant. I was identifying plants, but I wasn't planting them. And so a friend of mine was like, oh, you'd be great at gardening. I was like, I don't know about that. Mom used to do that. I don't know. And I felt that it was kind of like not nature. But when I started gardening, I was like, oh, this is intentional nature. This is amazing stuff. And there's places for wildness, and there's places for strict formal gardens, and there's all this in between. There's the edible gardens, there's the native plant gardens, there's the and it really became for me a real gateway into I guess talking to people about nature even more. I found that as here's another way of connecting people with their place.
Mm-hmm.
So for the next, oh gosh, I don't know how many, for the next 10 years, I guess, as that brings us up to 2020, I've had several different jobs. I worked with the cooperative extension and I worked with the early childhood agent there. And we fused nature play, or, nature and play together and learning together. At that time, we called these spaces outdoor classrooms. Now, they go by all kinds of different names, but nature play wasn't really the term that was all over the place at the time. Now it really is. So I was really happy to be part of that movement starting and seeing it morph also from a very like learning experience to a much more play-based experience. And that's where I'm more at now. I became a play worker back in 2015 or 16 out of the UK. Online course, I recommend that one through Adventure Pop-Up Play. And that really focuses on helping children, again, connect to their place by doing what they do best, which is play. And if we can create these amazing spaces for them to play at, then all the better, because the adult feels, whether it's their parent or their teacher, they feel more comfortable. There are some really awesome wild spaces as well. And a lot of the teachers, or parents need to feel pretty confident to go into that space. And so I help with that. I help with just stepping outside the door, just putting a foot out there. And so gardening has really become, for me, a way of helping a lot of people get into nature, because you can take the, the indoor potted plants and go, okay, I want something outside. Okay, well, maybe I'll put it not just in a pot, but maybe I'll put it in the ground. Well, okay, maybe I'll put a something I can eat out there, and so I'll return out there later and pick something from it, like a strawberry plant. And it just builds upon itself. And again, that aha moment of it's self-confidence building. It really connects people to the earth. So anyway, I could go on and on about that forever. So I was very involved in nature play and telling people about plants. I didn't have any wildlife in my background, and I found it very hard to get jobs at zoos. And I wanted a much more well-rounded environmental education experience. So I didn't want to just be the plant nerd, which I am, and that's okay. But on my resume, I wanted more stuff. So I wound up working at Southwest Wildlife Conservation Center. So it's a wildlife rehab in Scottsdale, Arizona. They do an amazing job helping out animals. And I was their director of education. So anybody who came out on a tour, but also revising our school field trip program. So the kids were getting a really wonderful experience and, learning how important it was to save wildlife. So from there, again, trying to okay, what do I not know? Okay, I got this part about helping wildlife, the importance of wildlife, the importance of how humans interact with wildlife. And I took that and I got a job from the Arizona Wildlife Federation. And I was really happy to hear that it was the state affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation. So, because I'd always really respected National Wildlife Federation. And so UNID, we went to New Hampshire for the Natural Start conference. Was that just last year? I think it was just last year.
It was just a year ago. Can you believe it? Feels like 20 years ago.
It feels like 20 years ago. Absolutely. Not just because of COVID, because we've created a friendship that's, this kind of spans time, it feels like. So, exactly. So at that conference, I met a woman from the National Wildlife Federation who had been hired to help teach their nature play program. And it was a fairly new program. I started talking to her about this program. It's called the ECHO program. So it's Early Childhood Health Outdoors. And it follows the philosophy of Robin Moore, and he's with the Natural Start Initiative out in North Carolina. And I'd been following his work for quite some time, and I'd taken many of his courses. I've gone out to his summit in North Carolina and followed his design. I actually took his class as a designer, not just an educator, which was just a wonderful, interesting experience. And so I got to talking with Adrian from the National Wildlife Federation, And I said, you know what's weird is that I just applied for a job at the Arizona Wildlife Federation. She's like, well, I hope you get it so we can do nature play in Arizona. And
Yes.
so on the way home, I called up the guy I'd interviewed with because I hadn't heard anything from him. And I was like, hey, how's that interview going? Am I going to get hired from you guys? And he's like, oh, do you actually want the job? I don't know how he meant that. Like, in my fantasy brain goes, oh, well, I'm obviously just so amazing. They were surprised that I would take that job. I don't know. And I was like, yeah, I want this job, especially hearing now how we can connect the National Wildlife Federation. I think he was very impressed too that I, made that connection with National. And so yeah, came back and went, you're going to hire me. And they did. So let me tell you a little bit about what Arizona Wildlife Federation does. So just like the National Wildlife Federation, we educate about wildlife and we advocate for wildlife. So this was something I'd never done before. I was never into understanding the political scheme, was never into meeting with my legislators. That was something I was just like, no, I am raising the little ones so they know how to vote. Yeah, I'm going to start them young. So that's been very interesting to me over the last, I've been with them for a year now, doing advocacy, meeting with our Arizona senators, meeting with our Arizona representatives, and finding out what the connection to nature was. And then kind of like, hey, you like animals or you like hiking. Let's make this better. Let's make this stronger. You love the Grand Canyon. Let's make this stronger.
Right.
While at the same time, talking to people about the importance that wildlife has, because so many people, when I like I said, I'm a plant nerd, right? So I tour guide at the Desert Botanical Garden and I take kids out. Now, these are all kids from Phoenix. The instant they see a lizard, they're just berserk. They're like, oh my God, a lizard. Like they've never seen a lizard before. And it's wonderful. And I love it every time that they do it. Lizards are all over their back, they're on the backyard. They've seen lizards before, but they just go crazy about it. So, here I am thinking, okay, here's this gardening as a way of getting, adults into nature. But what the kids like is that animation. So they love wildlife. And, we have that, we continue that carrying up, in our adult lives too, take care of a pet, take care of our kids, but a lot of us, when we go out in nature, we love to see that thing that's there. We call it a snap. So it's a seasonal, natural, amazing phenomenon, and often that means an animal, whether it's a butterfly or a lizard, something kind of plain like that, or charismatic megafauna like a bear or a deer or a raccoon or something that you don't see every day, but we're just as amazed with butterflies and lizards, the stuff we see kind of on a daily basis, and that's how I also feel about a plant that's like blooming, like the day it goes ta-da, not just like here's a couple blooms, I'm getting there, but like when the tree goes, yeah, I'm awesome. I love that.
I have to say,
I'm rambling along.
I've seen you in action with plants. And when she says this, she legit has a connection with plant. And she gives a whole personality behind the plant too. I love it. I love it.
I wish I could draw, and then I would do like cartoons of plants' personality, because they all speak to me for sure. So what I'm moving into now with the Arizona Wildlife Federation, we're really excited about a few new education programs that we're doing, and they all come from the national office. So as the state affiliate, we're independent. We don't have to take on the different stuff that NWF does. Of course, we're very inspired by that. They're amazing. They have great branding. They have great teams. So it's very easy for us to go, we'll hop on that bandwagon. But we can also do some of our own stuff as well. And we also have our own constituents. So Arizona Wildlife Federation has been around since the 1920s. And our constituency has been traditionally the Browns, the hunters and the anglers. But we have a lot of gardeners in our midst too. And then we also have, we really want to start bringing in a lot more of that nature can be nearby, nature can be at your home. And one of the things I really learned from my time at the Evergreen State College, of course, it's a hippie college, it's got green in the name, it is a green, extremely progressive, extremely liberal school. And one of the things that I found very, very interesting is that almost everybody there claimed to be an environmentalist.
Okay.
But the only people who knew how to identify plants better than me were both hunters.
Wow.
And they're the one that really gave me this understanding. I didn't grow up hunting at all. So I really had, we go out fishing once in a while, but I think my dad would like purposefully not get anything. He loved being outdoors, but we never brought home anything. And so knowing these two guys who were hunters and how they could identify this tree or that tree or why it was important, and they could identify signs in the woods. And to me, being such a knowledge-based person, was like, that's a real way to share your connection. And so, as I get to know more, I'm learning how to be a hunter and a fisher now,
Right.
Or angler, whichever we want to call it. And I'm really seeing that those people who are fair chase hunters, that they really care about the wildlife that they're hunting, and they're good because they care about the wildlife that they're hunting. They're also, it makes them better hunters.
Right.
And they know what plants those deer are eating and where they need to go to find them. And they are very aware of the ecosystems. They're very aware of how climate change is affecting wildlife and populations, and where the plants are growing and no longer growing, and where the animals are trying to get them, and how their migration. It's just, it's mind blowing what's going on, the relationship between plants and animals. And
Right.
but we're not going to take care of it. Those, plants and animals will be along long after we have, eradicated ourselves. They're just life's going to find a way. So if we want to take care of plants and animals in our time, we need to do a couple things, which are, one, bring up that next generation is absolutely, bottom line, the most important. Because if you don't have that love of nature, you're not gonna vote for it. You're not gonna take care of it. And sometimes, like I said, it needs to be brought out. Like you had it when you were younger, or you had a sense of wonder about it, or you're nervous now, or maybe you live in an apartment so you don't think you can garden. So there's that. But I can advocate to people all day long about why they need to vote for nature. But if they don't have a love of nature, they're not going to do it, because they won't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Care. Yeah.
I agree.
So I'm sorry, I started talking about the education programs that we're doing. This is what you want to hear about, because this is so exciting, because Dee and I are trying to make a little partnership with this, and I'm really excited about this. So
The collaboration.
Yeah, collaboration. So going back to that ECHO program, the Early Childhood Health Outdoors. So what it is how to get kids having more physical activity outside. A lot of our playgrounds now are the play structure, and it looks like it offers a lot of different play, but it actually doesn't. And it really caters to children who like that type of play. And
Right.
the rest of the kids use it because they kind of have to, or because they recognize that's what playgrounds are. And so
Right.
they'll see that structure and go, oh, I can play there. But there's so many other places that they can play. And we're trying to, remind kids. I mean, you and I grew up not necessarily playing at a playground. If we saw swings, we were like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Right.
But now there's like a play structure, all over the place. And I think kids are growing up with this idea that that's the only place that they can play.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
so, and it really doesn't provide a really wide spectrum of the type of physical activity that kids can do. It does provide some, obviously, for sure. There's a little bit of climbing involved, and there's the,
Right.
all the little rope, dealy, all the different things that they can do. And that's awesome. And I'm not, I'm not saying that those should be eradicated. I think they should be there. But what we're trying to do also is create more spaces. Like, can they interact with nature? Because what's going to happen is they're going to do physical activity that's different than on that play structure.
Right.
They're also going to have, and I could get into the research, and I, oh my gosh, we won't even go down that rabbit hole, but there's more creativity with it. It's almost like that, if they're bored, they'll come up with something to do. Because the kids could be bored in a house with a PlayStation and all the devices and the play structure outside. I mean, they can still say they're bored.
Absolutely.
You know, and you take kids to a creek and it's like they won't be bored for hours, you know. But they have to kind of, you know, re-tap into that, you know, young early childhood, they get it without even thinking about it because they're already tapped into it. But as we grow, we lose it over time. So the ECHO program looks at spaces where kids can play and go, okay, how can we design this intentionally for more active play, more interaction with nature, open up for more creativity, more imagination, more cooperation between kids. And I think the program really does an amazing job. So it's based out of Denver. They have several demonstration sites and seed sites in the Denver area because that's where their staff can drive out to meet these sites. They've also developed wonderful online resources. And knowing that, you know, I love nature play, that's a lot of my background is in nature play. I went to them and said, what can we start doing in Arizona? So they're really receptive to the idea. And we're building the program here, which is awesome. And Outback Learning has been identified as one of our collaborations. And
Yes.
I've already come down, you know, I came down on my off AWF hours because I wasn't getting paid for doing nature play at that time. Now I am. And went down to Dee's place and just told her about some of the different things that she could do, you know, she could do at that site. And so it's been so wonderful over the past, God, that was just like January, wasn't it? So
It was just
just
the beginning of the year.
just over the past, you know, 9 months, even without Outback going on in the summer and beyond, all the amazing things that Dee's doing. And I'm so proud of you for bringing in chickens as well. I mean, you've really stretched your, you know, your zone of tolerance. You've been really
Yes.
stretching that into new things for yourself to do. So when the ECHO program asked me about different sites that we could find in Arizona, you know, Dee, you came to mind like absolutely right away.
Yes.
And it was something, you know, between you and Ellen Bashor and I, you know, we've been trying to get in the Arizona Association for Environmental Education, a little subgroup for just specifically for early childhood education to come along. And all of us were wearing so many different hats that it was hard to start. But now we've got that going as well. And, you know, the nice thing is when we can dedicate time to it, either through our jobs or through business that you have, or, you know, so that's been a byproduct of this ECHO program is creating that space too. So it's not just, a design on paper. And it's not just giving professional development to teachers, and it's not just helping them activate the site. It has all this ripple effect too. You know, we're helping a small business owner in Arizona have this dream, you know, and so again, because she's tapping into her love of nature, and, you know, so you're doing this through the children, through early childhood, and, you know, and letting them lead the way for you and bring you along. And you know, and that's, since they've become involved with you, you know, those little children are bringing you to these places that you haven't gone before. You've been too nervous to go before, and now you have. I hear this when you talk, you know, that you have this like almost like an excuse or justification. You know, I want to make those words more positive. Like, again, it's in natural resource interpretation, we use the word provocation, and the word has often been used in a negative fashion. You know, you look up provocation as a word. What does this word mean? It's often kind of like negative pushing, but how we use it is in natural resource interpretation is really an invitation. And because it should be something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone, but not to the point where you won't do it. We want to get people to be thinking about and doing something that stretches them a little bit. So that's been amazing for me to watch the transformation that's happening with you, and knowing that, you know, it sometimes, you know, people will take like there's a type of environmental education that takes kids out on like a 5-day or 10-day, you know, raft down the Colorado River or into the boundary waters of Wisconsin or Minnesota, or, you know, at these big, huge events, which are awesome. And again, there's totally a place for that. And a lot of the kids have kind of an epiphany through this, because they're reconnecting with this thing, but they're also old enough as teens and high schoolers to build their own skills and confidence in doing this program, which are amazing programs. And they often happen very, very quickly, a few days out, especially after something that, the tons of rain or whatever, and the kids, after 2 days are like, they get it, and they move forward with it, even through this adversity.
Right.
But what I find just as amazing is something that takes even a couple months, a couple years to kind of bring out from a person. So yeah, that's, whenever I think of you, I always think of that it's someday you'll be hugging a chicken. I know you will. I know it.
It's interesting because, with my family, and you probably listened to podcast episodes, I've always been in nature. It's just, it hasn't necessarily been the same way other people explore it. And so I find myself exploring it in a new way, which is actually feeling it, because I've always explored it through visually or just audio, whether it's just walking in the park or whatever I was doing as a child. But now as an adult, I'm going, okay, I'm actually going to try this, like have chickens. But I think you brought up some really good points when it comes to introducing environmental ed, especially at an early age. So when people ask, like, why are you taking kids outside? Like, what is that about? Well, it's because it starts there. And I remember when I very first started Outback a little over a year ago, and you touched on it, and the fact that, like, I feel like there is a generation of kids that only view the outdoors as going to the park because their parents drove them there or they walked there, however they got there, but that's their outdoor experience. And I'll never forget the first month or so that I had the Outbackers. They were just kind of like testing, like I'm giving the look of how they look. They're like, so I can actually play with the rocks. Like, I can actually do these things. I can actually run around, and because they were kind of lost. And the younger the kids were, the younger the Outbacker, it got even more interesting. I had one little guy, he's like, get me out of here. But he was just so lost. And it was a matter of just like, okay, we're going to walk to the park, or just showing him how we can engage in outdoors. And I thought that was amazing to watch, just to witness a 3.5-year-old, 3.5. He had already been in the outdoors enough to know, well, the outdoors means there's a playground and there's going to be lots of toys. And that's how I'm going to entertain myself. And it wasn't until he learned, well, I can actually jump off of this giant rock and you'll be here and I'll be safe and I'll be fine. But that was the interesting experience. So that's why I enjoy, like, when you talk about just your career span and just, I don't know, just working with young kids and even adults, just learning about the outdoors.
The big difference is how much time is spent outside. So, and almost every, and I would assume every, I don't do the licensing part of early childhood, but every child care facility and early child care facility has that time that they need to go outside.